Hello everybody and welcome back to the Bayonetta 2 walkthrough. It's time for more Infinite Climax mode with Rosa. So we begin with chapter 5, which also has a remarkably small amount of verses that you actually have to do. So there's verse 1, there's like verse 5, verse 7, there's only about 5 or so verses that you actually have to do. It's an absolute blessing. Now, seeing as we are going to be here for quite a long time, like, as you can see, this is another over 30-minute part, which is going to take us up to Boulder at the end of chapter 12. So we're getting a lot covered in this particular part. Although I'd say it's probably nearly identical to the way third Climax ended up working out. But either way, it's probably a good time to return once again to the wonderful Platinum Games blog, because there's a ridiculous amount of stuff here that I haven't talked about, or at least I haven't referred to explicitly. So, now's a good time. So the first thing is Bayonetta's design. So, obviously Bayonetta is the modern witch, and obviously she's had a complete makeover for this game. Now, after Hashimoto, Kamiya and Shimazaki talked to each other, they came to the conclusion that Bayonetta is not the kind of girl who would show up with the same hairstyle for her sequel. So, she was in the mood for something short. And the overall theme with the design is solid. So she's still wearing black, but kind of her shorter hair gives her a slightly more masculine look. And there's a lot more of a focus on straight lines, apart from in her glasses, which are softer than they were in the original game. They also had kind of some debate over where to show skin, because obviously you've got to get the balance right so that there's sort of a slight sexuality nature of it, but also the importance that, you know, it's not too much or too little. But once they decided on having where the new cape would come with kind of around the front, they closed the front of the suit off and opened up a lot in the back, so you have the back kind of hole and you also have all of the kind of diamonds on the legs. Then, because water kind of is a big theme, Hashimoto wanted the kind of key colour to be blue, which is rather difficult in kind of video games, because blue isn't as sharp as red. So kind of blue, red and black kind of contrast quite nicely to a lot of stuff, whereas blue kind of blends into loads of other textures and colours. And then having to balance that with black and silver, it's not easy. Although, having said that, there is a very particular kind of light blue which does work remarkably well with black, and it's kind of similar to the colour of his blue that they went with, I think, in the end. But ever since they decided to have Bayonetta wearing a sleek black outfit, it's always been an absolute nightmare getting her to stand out, but I think they have done a phenomenally good job. Now, Shimazaki says that taking a step back and looking at how Bayonetta's design turned out, she realises that they went in a completely different direction from the last game, which makes her think that Bayonetta's new look was only possible because of the previous one. So it's contrasting because of the first one that happened. So it's a different impression, but it's still absolutely quintessentially Bayonetta. And then we have Jeanne. So the key word for Jeanne's concept design was casual. And Kamiya basically came up to Shimazaki and said, "I want to put her on a bike. Draw me a biker suit." And because Jeanne is one of Kamiya's favourite characters, pretty much anything Hashimoto and Shimazaki said got shot down instantly. And while there were kind of numerous ones that Kamiya liked, they all kind of maintained a relative simplicity that's similar to what ended up in the game. And while Shimazaki didn't intend to accentuate this element of the concept art, Kamiya said that Jeanne looks flatter than ever, which he's happy about, because obviously he's a slight bit of a pervert. And then, in order to make sure that she contrasted to Bayonetta, they gave her very long hair, which obviously looks awesome. And while obviously she still uses All for One, Shimazaki decided to update the guns with a personal touch. So in the last game, the charms were based off of each respective's gun name, but this time she used kind of the name of the whole set as the motif and made the little cat plushes, each of which is based upon the character that they are kind of there for, which is just really wonderful. And the colour scheme is borrowed from the Three Musketeers anime, which is just really adorable. And then I believe that the second bit of concept art, or character design, that appears, well, it appeared September 19th, 2014 on the blog. Not going to go into dates of when these stuffs turned up, but just thought it'd be there. So, we begin with Luca, who most people aren't going to forget. And what Kamiya asked for was that the design showed that Luca had overcome his troubled past from the original Bayonetta and become more of a man. Which is a very difficult thing to try and kind of convey. Because obviously in the first game, Luca is just so much of a show-off bozo that she ended up taking things in a very weird direction. So the designs that she ended up making this time round were looking like a war correspondent, or the main character from Robert Rodriguez's El Mariachi, but couldn't make out what the grown into more of a man meant. So Luca had to be more flaunty, but couldn't go too far. So basically she gave him a bit of the hint of the old Luca flair with a hat, and basically gives Luca some semblance to the young days of his father, Antonio Redgrave, which is really awesome. And then we have Rodan, who is surprisingly easy to figure out for this game. They didn't really give Shimazaki any specific direction, so she tried him in both traditional and Japanese outfits and regular clothes, and learned that Japanese clothes actually look really good on Rodan, and the designs got approved very, very quickly. Now, the glasses have some kind of traditional Japanese design work on the side, which is pretty awesome. And a really nice little anecdote, it's not really an anecdote, it's a sentence, is that Shimazaki felt like the Bayonetta team not only puts up with a ridiculous level of detail, but expects it. So they're totally willing to go for anything completely bonkers. And then Enzo, whose design got settled faster than any other character. Probably because he's very easy to understand, and also because of his shape, which makes it easy to tell what works and what doesn't. So, wannabe Italian gangster, and so we end up with the rather awesome funny suit. And also kind of, whereas he used to be wearing green, he's now dark red in colour with clothing. And it's something that Shimazaki likes to do, so she likes to come up with a key colour for a design, for a character's design, and then sticks to it. Only in Enzo's case that would mean changing absolutely nothing about him, say the style of his clothes, and they didn't want that, so they ended up going for the dark red. And then there's some wonderful concept art of Rosa, but they wouldn't go into anything because obviously that's technically spoiler territory for this game, revealing that you can fight alongside Rosa and also that you see everything that happens to her. And last but not least, in the concept art, well, character concept art stuff, we have Loki. So in the original Bayonetta you travelled with Cereza, who was adorable, and that was awesome. And this time you have the mysterious kid that sports some attitude, and is a bit of a sod. Now, designing Loki had quite a number of twists and turns, because initially he was planned to be a girl, but Kamiya kind of saw that and said, did that first game, and so they changed him to a boy. And I think the fact that Loki began as female and then kind of the character changed, just it explains kind of the rather androgynous look. I mean, I guess kind of he's God, which you would expect some androgyny in anyway. But because I remember when the design first got revealed and the voice, and everyone was just like, I can't tell. Is this mysterious boy or mysterious girl? This is slightly disconcerting. But that makes so much sense of the confusion that surrounded Loki initially. But basically what Shimazaki wanted was to kind of give him a modern look that was still reminiscent of the otherworldliness of his character. And also, she designed the entire set of tarot cards, even though he only uses a few specific ones in the actual game. And then there's also the verse cards, which preserved the same basic design, but they were a collaboration between the entire team. And yes, it's just rather awesome. And then there's also the art for the Masked Lumen, which also nothing really could be explained there, because, spoilers, it's Boulder, but kind of almost everybody who played the original game figured that out before the game had even turned up. And then the game just reveals it so blatantly that, yeah. But the key concepts in mind whilst designing him were straight lines and grace. And then we move on to the Super Mirror 2 and the unlockable costumes with the Umbran Gekka, Policewoman and Skullgirl. Now, as I believe I said at the time when they first got revealed, is that the basic design process was that they brainstormed together, so at least Shimazaki and Hashimoto brainstormed together and thought about what costumes the fans would like, and then out of those, Kamiya, Hashimoto and Shimazaki chose their own that they liked. So, in the first Bayonetta, Kamiya was the director, so he chose the PE uniform, and for Bayonetta 2, Hashimoto was the director, and he chose the Umbran Gekka. And Kamiya admitted that he probably indulged himself a little too much when he made his choices for the first Bayonetta, so he chose something with a little bit more mass appeal. And went for the policewoman, and then Shimazaki chose the schoolgirl outfit, which rather awesomely taught each other their individual preferences. Now, this particular verse that I am just skipping here was evil because it involved a sloth and lots of other enemies, and I actually managed to skip it, which I wasn't expecting to be able to do, but I did, and I'm so glad I did, because that would have had me stuck for ages. And I think that pretty much brings us to the end of our character design tangent, which I think has well, it's covered everything that Shimazaki stated on the stuff. Haven't gone into enemy design yet, but that'll probably get involved in the next 15 minutes or so, or in the next Infinite Climax part. And now as we begin verse 11 of chapter 8. I'm actually remembering these chapter numbers. I'm quite proud of myself, because normally I'd just be like, yep, can't remember which chapter this is in at all. Just kind of, yeah, we are fighting fidelities and killing them, and it's going well. But I remember stuff, just about. Oh yes, 3 resentments at the same time. Yes, this is lovely, isn't it? Anyway, what I was about to go into, before I was so rudely interrupted by those resentments turning up, is damage motion. So, the lead motion designer in Bayonetta 2 is Takaaki Yamaguchi, who's been making motion in action games for over 10 years now. Now, obviously, what a motion designer does, which was actually discussed by him in the old Bayonetta blogs, but it's give movement to anything in the game that requires movement. So, enemies, and certain areas, and character controls, and so on and so forth. So, when working on a sequel, it's their job to carry over the feel of the motion from the original Bayonetta and improve it. So, the main thing that they worked on was the damage motion for enemies. So, obviously, they have that thing where you land a really powerful blow and they get knocked back or explode, and it's not something that you think deeply about at all. And to be perfectly honest, it's probably something that you don't really even care about. But getting the balance right of that reaction is very important. Because if you do a slack job of it, then the thrill of battle will just be a complete and utter letdown. So you've got to get the balance right. And the challenge that Yamaguchi set himself was to create the right enemy motion for each attack. Which basically means that Bayonetta 2 has pretty much 3.5 times the number of reactions that the original game had. Because the enemies never necessarily react in the same way to each hit, and it's bonkers. And also, the enemy's reaction changes based on the kind of attack used. So, they really went all out in improving just what's a very, very tiny little bit. And it all works to change how the game feels, which is just awesome. And let's try and find something else that's fun to talk about whilst we're taking down Prophet, because I don't find him particularly fun anymore. Well, I guess it'd be good to go into talking about the enemy design, because once again, Yusuke Hashimoto, who directed Bayonetta 2, he did the enemy designs for the original game, and obviously he did it again for this one, so repeating double duty. So, unlike the strict hierarchical structure of the angels, demons exist in a brutal dog-eat-dog world. So, for their appearance, have to avoid the cliché sinister look, and go for something more inorganic and almost robotic. which resulted in what you see before you in this game. So with Hideous, the whole thing was hatred given form. So it prowls around Inferno looking for prey, and unlike its angelic counterpart, which is Acceptance, the Centaurs, the design came together relatively quickly. And then you have Fury, which is its attack is easy to understand with an on-off state, with the opening up of the eye, which is quite cool. Then with Pain, it's about the same level as the Angel Beloved in terms of strength, and the goal was to add something fresh to the battles, so, well, basically by going as far from a humanoid shape as humanly possible. And so he thought it'd be cool to have an enemy that transformed from a tombstone, which led to the design for Pain, which is really insane and really quite clever. And then we get the really awesome thing about Gamora. So, there was a design for Gamora in the first game, which had his whole body, but we never actually got to see his whole body. I think partly because he had rather kind of tiny T-Rex arms, which kind of made him look a little bit ridiculous, so they just kind of kept it to his head. But for this game they decided to kind of expand on that and show the entire body, which is kind of multi-legged and all sorts, so he's awesome. And I also feel like I should remind people that while you think his eyes are kind of the red glowy things on the side of his dragon face, no, it's the skull with the crown on top that's sitting on top of that dragon head that is its actual face, which is terrifying. And that pretty much covers all the kind of enemy design stuff, which is a slight kind of not that much. It's certainly nowhere near as detailed as what Shimazaki was writing, but it's still pretty cool. Also, I absolutely despise this verse. Fighting sloths is just not pleasant. Like, really seriously not pleasant. Because they will dodge you a lot. So it is just very, very difficult to get through. Decided to cut out the kind of fight alongside Rodan because nothing really changes. Still challenging, but it's not that bad. And thankfully, while Alrune's difficult, kind of making use of the bloody lollipops, which increases your kind of attack damage, works wonders. And for some bizarre reason, I ended up getting kind of nice little motion going, which meant I was doing a reasonably good job of dodging, which I'm quite proud of. But I guess a good thing to move on to here, seeing as we are about to see what is still one of my favourite kind of cutscenes in the game, is the process of cutscene production. So, Kunihiko Suda wrote the blog post about cutscene production, and it's really awesome. So, two of the most distinguishing characteristics of the original game were its unparalleled over-the-top action and its cast of unique characters. So it's kind of incorporating those unique characteristics and action sequences into the cutscenes. So, like Bayonetta 1, the scenario for Bayonetta 2 is written by Hideki Kamiya, so obviously that's all good. And based on the original script, they created video storyboards to decide on the direction and characteristics of each scene. Now, At that kind of stage of development, it's also common to use the non-video storyboards, but since Bayonetta 2 has a lot of new characters, and Bayonetta herself hasn't remained unchanged since the first game, they decided it would be best to create video storyboards in order to make it easier for Yusuke Hashimoto, who directed the game, and Yuji Shimomura, who's the cutscene director, who also did a lot of hard work on the first game, because he did the same role there, to reach mutual understanding of how to convey that Bayonetta has changed and grown. And they actually have a really, really wonderfully awesome little clip of one of these examples, and they also have the one that they included in the original Bayonetta blog when they also discussed cutscene production. So, like, they actually put actors in the costumes that the characters were wearing, kind of did all the camera shots and kind of basic special effects, and it's awesome because obviously it kind of gives the developers an idea of how the scene plays, and it means that you can kind of settle on certain details when you are actually making the cutscene. And after recording kind of that video storyboard, they then went into the motion capturing, at which point kind of make detailed adjustments and revisions to the stage direction and kind of cutscene triggers and so on and so forth, and then you make the models and just recreate the scenes in general. And it's kind of in processing all that they give the cutscenes their typical Bayonetta-like qualities by accelerating motions to a speed that's impossible for actual human beings, and creating a lot of the physically difficult poses for Bayonetta herself, because some of these are nigh on impossible for any human being in reality to do. And they basically, in video form, show you the progress throughout that. So they have the video storyboard, the kind of general model rig of the cutscene, and then the final version. And it's basically the cutscene that you see in Chapter 4 just before facing down Boulder. Now, having gotten through all of that, I guess I should discuss the difficulty of this particular verse in Infinite Climax with Rosa. Although it may not quite be just for Rosa, but it's a pain in the backside. Now, one hit from anything in this verse will kill you, which makes the opening segment just hellish. Like, I died so many times on that opening segment that it just drove me balmy, because I was always not dodging at the right time for the first thorny thing, and then always jumping too late or too soon on the thorny thing in the ground. So I just kept dying at that first moment, and it was just like, this is ridiculous. But thankfully I made it to the boss fight, and then it was just a case of finishing the dude off. And I also feel I should point out, it's kind of a really, really odd point to bring this up, but Rosa's kind of beast within form is tiger within, because that is actually a tiger. It's difficult to tell because, you know, it's black. Because obviously tigers are normally orange and black, and it's kind of just pure black with some sort of goldy kind of bronze kind of stripes. Which is very difficult to tell. I thought it was some sort of panther. Not panther, but sort of some sort of other big cat, not quite a tiger. And her equivalent for bat within is hornet within. There's loads of bugs, which is quite fun. And I feel I should also point out the irony of the fact that Baldur is now going to attempt to kill Rosa. I mean, obviously, it's, in terms of the story, it's Bayonetta, but it's the fact that he is actively fighting and attacking his love. Because, I mean, obviously, well, the lipstick that he has hanging on his waist is the same one that Bayonetta uses in the original game to finish him off with the absolutely beautiful "Don't fuck with a witch." Because on it says Baldur and Rosa with love until the end of time, and then it gives a date, which I can't remember, but it's something 14 something. Which is just awesome. And yes, I did die during fighting this particular form of Baldur. It's difficult, but it's certainly, I would say, a lot easier to get through than Chapter 13. Chapter 13? Chapter 7 or Chapter 4's version, because those are just evil. There we go, part 2 of Infinite Climax is complete! Yes! We are making it through. One more part to go. Can I complete it? You'll just have to wait and see.